Well, that is well-behaved audience right there. I didn't pound the gavel and everybody got quiet. But it is 6 o'clock. So we will start our meeting this evening and appreciate those of you who are in attendance this evening. We'll start tonight. Councilmember Severing will give us a thought or invocation and then lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So, Councilman Severing.
I will give an invocation. Heavenly Father, we come before thee, and at this time and season, we give thanks for the abundance that we have and pray for those around the world and even locally who might need additional blessings and strength. We are mindful of many in our city who mourn this night, and may also be struggling physically, emotionally, and spiritually. May they be sustained by thy good hand. We're grateful to assemble this night and are thankful for the liberties that we enjoy in this great country. We pray for our leaders, our political leaders, and we pray for the leaders of so many other countries and states that they might be blessed and that we might be able to move forward in greater unity. We give thanks. We pray for the attendance of thy spirit. The decisions rendered would be appropriate for the benefit of the citizens. And give thanks again for our abundance and pray for this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that invocation, Councilmember Severing. I guess I better scoot down and get this one. For those of you who may or may not know, one of our previous planning commission members passed away unexpectedly the other morning, Steve Prisby, very young in age and left a young family. So we hope our thoughts and prayers will be with his family as they grieve during this time. We'll start our meeting tonight. We have a presentation, I believe, John, to start our meeting today regarding fiber optic.
I think we're going to do Britain first. It's not on your agenda.
Well,
it's further
down. So do we need a motion to change the order of the agenda, John?
Oh,
It is on the agenda. I was going to suggest that. It's down at item number 4.
so sorry, I apologize.
Mayor,
Uh,
I make a motion that we change our agenda to swear in Britain now.
I think that's a good motion, Councilmember Barker. Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Have a second by Councilmember Stoker. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of moving item number 4 up on the agenda so we can swear in our new police officer, Brenton Griggs, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And I failed to mention, Councilmember Swanson has asked to be excused for a portion of our meeting, but he will be joining us hopefully around 6:45, so he will be with us. So with that, Susan, do you want to swear in our new officer?
Should probably swear.
I do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. And congratulations.
Thank you. He's done that before, Brendan. He's drawn blood.
Part of
for the initiation.
Britton, we'll go ahead and let you take your 45 minutes to talk about why you wanted to join the force. And Chief, you usually like to say a few words and introduce Britton, give us a little background.
Britton Griggs, he's from Cache Valley, his wife over there behind the camera, Emily, and he's got some other family. I'm not sure I'd introduce them, but we haven't been introduced yet. Britton graduated from Bridgerland and Applied Technology College, the Satellite Academy up there, a week ago last Friday. So we were one of his first applicants, and we were fortunate to snap him up before anybody else did. I know his wife's from Weaver County, and I think she's anxious to make it move back. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And real quick, Sean Call, City Attorney, City Manager. This is Mayor Berube. This is Councilwoman Cheryl Stoker, Councilman / Fireman Ryan Barker. Councilman Severin and Councilwoman Dexter. And we're missing one.
Britton, thank you for joining our force. We look forward to having you with us. All right, we'll now have our presentation, John, regarding some fiber optic options. So we'll go ahead and proceed. Thank you.
Mayor and council members, we appreciate the opportunity to present to you this evening. My name is Sylvia Wilkins, and I'm with the Business Development Team, Strata Networks. And John Bingham here with me, Network Development Manager for Strata Networks. We're under the impression that you're still in the preliminary phase of looking at fiber to your city. And so please ask questions during the presentation or guide the conversation. That would be helpful as you're going through this process. You can go to the first slide.
John, can we get this microphone functioning?
So we have to unplug Susan's to go there, or it might be.
We just want to make sure those on Zoom can hear you.
Yeah, since we moved the podium from the middle, we lost our microphone jack. So.
All right, thank you. We'll start off by introducing Strata Networks. I don't know if any of you are familiar with us, but we've been around for 70 years out in the Uinta Basin. The headquarters are in Roosevelt, Utah. We've been doing fiber for over 30 years and fiber to the home for 25 years. Some of the other services that we offer are voice and broadband, nationwide wireless. We do carrier aggregation and switching. We have a managed IT and telemetry services division, marketing, media production, and distribution division. We have a state-of-the-art data center located in Vernal and a sophisticated 24/7, 365 network operations center. So members and those we serve can have access to support 24/7. You can go to the next slide. Some of the things that we offer to cities that are looking in doing fiber networks, we provide infrastructure to every home, business, public facility, and private institution. We provide non-discriminatory open access, so you can have several internet service providers on the network that serve your residents and businesses. Our model shares the financial and operational risks with the city. The services are cost effective and affordable for residents, and you can also have the network provide interconnection between your city facilities, parks, and it can also be used for smart city initiatives.
Can you just expand a little bit on the definition of shared financial and operational risks? Or
Sure.
is that later in the slides?
It is a little bit later, but we
Okay.
can go into that now if you'd like.
We can wait.
Okay. You can go to the next slide. We look at doing fiber network projects with cities as a public-private partnership. Strata Networks takes care of a lot of the operations and maintenance, and North Ogden City is the connection to the residents. They're the ones that kind of can give us direction on what they would like that network to look like. In a lot of cases, they are the ones that do the financing for that, whether it's a bond or other avenues of funding that you have. One of the unique things about Strata Networks is that we are able to see the project through from beginning to end. We have in-house engineering department, construction department that can construct the network and oversee that clear till the end of operating the network, even serving as an internet service provider on your network. You can go to the next slide. So here's where we can talk about sharing the risk of the network. And this is one of the reasons why Strata started working with cities on fiber network projects, is that we had several cities reach out to us about 18 months ago because the models that were available, they were taking on all of the risk in financing and being the backstop for that network, but they weren't seeing any the rewards in the end. And so Strata has come in and they partner with the city. We want to be a trusted partner, build out that network, how you would like to see it build out. And in the end, Strata only gets paid when there's customers on the network. The city controls the finances of the network. From the subscribers that are on the network, they are able to pay down the bond if there's excess in revenue, which most of the models are very conservative. And so it is foreseen that there will be that. They are able to pay off the bond sooner, use it for other infrastructure needs, or even potentially lower the rates for the residents and businesses in their city. So there's a lot of partnership that goes into that. It is a very unique model and something that is not seen in a lot of other models that are out there today. John, do you have anything to add to that?
Only to emphasize, the model we're proposing is that the city owns this network. It's their asset. Yes, the city is on the hook for the bond, but it is their asset and it's a valuable asset to the city. So you're not backing a bond and giving that asset to somebody else. It's the cities, it stays with the city. Strata's role, I mean, cities, especially, about this size of a city, starting a fiber optic network it's not in the wheelhouse, and so, but bonding a project like this is definitely within the wheelhouse of a city. And so we're coming in to offer the expertise that we have to manage this network, operate it, keep it functioning, make it usable and friendly to the community, yet the city owns the asset.
If there's no questions, go to the next slide, please. The network that we recommend is designed using carrier class materials. It's an all fiber hybrid passive optical network, also with active Ethernet for those that require a dedicated line. So this is a little bit different than others you probably have heard about as well. But we recommend this approach because of our experience in the past. Passive optical network is beneficial because of its scalability and efficiency. And so that is what we recommend, but we are open to recommendations from your group if the city would like to see one or the other used as well. And And we can go into further conversations about these things as you move along in the process and have more questions about that. Next slide, please. A lot of people have the question of how much is this going to cost? In our experience and with what we currently provide to our customers is, you'll see it's kind of small on the very bottom. For a 250 megabits per second package, it's $65 is the total end cost to the consumer. And for a 1 gig package, it's $75. And we have it broken down. The internet service provider on the 250 package would get $13. The city infrastructure allocation, which would go towards a bond payment, would be $25 per subscriber. The network operator would get $20. And then we also recommend that $7 of that 65 be set aside for network refresh allocations when things need upgraded or new additions to the network need to be added, that there is a fund that's being set aside to allocate for those costs. This is a subscription model. You might notice at the top that there's a utility fee. We also offer a utility model. There have been some cities interested in that. And that just takes $10 from the city infrastructure allocation and moves it to the utility line still for the $25 a month, which pays for the bond. The utility model is just less risk for the city because you're getting a fee from every resident in your city, but it is also sometimes not what the residents are for politically as well. So there's those two models that you can look into and we can discuss further as well. We don't have, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so North Ogden is the network operator?
No,
No?
that would be like Strata Networks would be your
Okay.
network operator.
So we would, because I'm trying to reconcile in my mind, we own the, North Ogden would own the fiber.
Correct.
Okay, but we wouldn't be paying any fee for that.
So yeah, so you would be getting the network refresh allocation fee and the city infrastructure allocation, which would help pay your bond so that you could own that asset, and then that asset would be yours.
Thank you.
Yeah. You have any clarification on that? Okay. Any more questions on those? Kind of going through this fast. And I believe that was all of the sites. Anything else? Sometimes there's questions about construction methodologies that would be used to construct the fiber network. In our experience, we use primarily micro trenching, but we also are able to do boring if that is what the city would like, or we do aerial as well. There's John, I'll let John talk about this. He is kind of over the construction and can give you a little more detail on when and where and kind of how they decide which method to use.
We use all methods of construction, any aerial trenching, plowing, which we would be using in this city, micro trenching. So any methods, and we've got specifications for all of our construction methods to that we can share with you and show how the construction is done, if that's something you want to look into. I think mainly, we're wondering where the city is. I think they've had you've had presentations in the past, which is very similar to many cities. A lot of cities are looking around because of the lack of satisfaction with internet throughout their city. And we're providing an option where if the city is going to be involved in a model where the city owns or has to financially back a project, again, this is a project where the city owns this asset, yet state law doesn't allow you to provide a service, an internet service. So you make this an open access network where internet service providers, whoever they are, can come and provide service on your network without having to place another fiber optic line along your sidewalks or streets. We'll build a fiber hub in probably this city. We probably have 2 different locations where we would build hubs, carry the traffic back to call it a POP, different internet buildings throughout the Wasatch Front. And those internet service providers can meet us there, sell their services to your residents. It's a model that sometimes, if you haven't had it explained to you a few times, we're happy to explain it again because it can spin your head sometimes. So it allows private internet service providers to compete and provide services on your community network. So.
Council, any questions?
I do. In case you haven't noticed, North Ogden is built mostly on mountains, so we have a lot of rock. So what are we looking at in terms of getting that that fiber cable laid? Because that's, right now we're, in fact, that's on the agenda. I don't know if you saw tonight, we're, the bond for the public safety building. So we're a little bond leery right now. So
Okay, yes, there's rock. There's probably everywhere. There's in the lower part of the valley, there's probably good soil too, but you're gonna get everything. Yes, rock can add cost. That is one of the reasons that that micro trenching has been found to be successful. Just to explain a little more about micro trenching. We have a machine that digs a trench about 1.5 inches wide, and it's about 16 inches deep. And we do it right in the asphalt. So it runs this vertical trench in the asphalt. We lay the conduits inside of that. We'll swing the conduits out where we need to provide services to the homes along the way. And that trench is then backfilled with flowable fill and sealed with we use a mastic seal that protects it and seals it with the asphalt. So it's usually, not always, usually the road when it was built has a road base, and when we plow that in, where you're actually above the rock, and you save a lot of costs by being just above that rock. There's a lot of streets that might have that much asphalt on rock, so you get a little of everything, but this is definitely, next to aerial, the cheapest construction method. And we have equipment, we're very familiar with constructing in rock too. We have board machines that will drill through solid rock. We can do it all. It does add cost. For anybody looking at building a fiber optic network, anybody is going to have to deal with the rock in your city. So.
Council, any other questions? Councilman Barker.
What's the term on the bond payment?
So the city would be the one to set that up, but usually 25 years. And we can, if you want to look into it further, we are also able to provide pro formas 10 years out, 20 years out, if that's helpful.
And how many subscribers does the city need before we're liable for the payment?
So usually to break even on your payment, you're going to need somewhere between like 35–40% is usually what it comes out to be.
So this is my biggest concern. For the next 5 to 10 years, I think we have that. But 10 years from now, who knows what internet's going to be? And now the city's going to be liable for another 15 years if something that might be obsolete. And I look back, and I've used this example multiple times. An iPhone was invented 13 years ago. We're doubling that for this type of network. I physically don't understand how that's responsible for the city to put themselves into that debt for 25 years where we don't even know if there's better technology coming.
Right, and so that's why I think with the city owning the asset, it's less risky for you because you're able to look ahead and see if something might happen and be able to sell that asset or do something else with it. Whereas in some other models, you don't have access to that or control over that. So.
And then, sorry, I got one more question.
Okay.
This is my other big concern. Who maintains the network if it's the city's asset?
So that would be part of the network operator fee that you would choose a network operator, pay them a fee, and they would help maintain that. The refresh parameters that we have you set aside every year, we can come to you and say, hey, this is what we think that you would need to refresh the network. You would ultimately have the decision on what you would do with that. But with our experience, we feel that $7 will cover all the maintenance and refresh that you would need.
But we'd have to hire inside staff, or
No.
you're gonna come up from Vernal to maintain it for us.
We would have a permanent presence.
Okay.
Yes. We're doing this in other cities in northern Utah right now. Providence, Utah is one that's under construction, and we will have a permanent.
I've spoken with Pleasant View when you presented this, they were told they had to hire 2 to 3 people in-house to maintain their network.
I'm not familiar with what that would be.
That was my question.
Unless I'll throw this out there as maybe something that was brought up. When you're building a network this big, we want to build it within 24 to 36 months, whatever we do. And I'm not sure what they were referring to, but all of a sudden to do a network that big throughout the city requires additional people to locate water lines, city water, city sewer. It could be, maybe they were referring to that during the construction period, or a contract with a locating company. And you're smart to think about the future and say, what kind of technologies are coming up? Is the fiber optic network going to be a solid solution for 25 years? And as far as anybody in technology can see right now, yes, it will be. 5G is brought up regularly as, wait, what's 5G going to do? If I could help explain a little more about 5G, it's a glorified Wi-Fi that does not pass through trees, buildings. In other words, you have to have line of sight. So, and it has a short range, doesn't go out very far. So in order to get those gig speeds that you get on fiber, you have to have a 5G tower very close and within line of sight of any service. So you have an antenna on your home that can see that antenna shot from the 5G, which means you'll have, basically they say about one tower every block. And what needs to feed those towers is fiber. Those towers need fiber to bring that traffic back. So a city that all of a sudden gets approached by somebody wanting to build a 5G network is sitting on an opportunity to sell fiber circuits to those 5G towers. That's just one example.
We appreciate it. I think just in summary, you asked where we were on this. We are in the process, I think John just recently approving the survey to see what our citizens would desire. We've deferred a decision because of our bonding of the public safety building. I think to Councilman Barker's point, trying to analyze really what the future would be, because the city is on the hook for the entire bond for 25 years. And so we're just kind of going through that analysis right now, waiting to get information back on the survey. So, but we appreciate you coming and visiting with us this evening, and stay in contact with us. And we'll let you know where we're going.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, we'll move into our consent agenda. Council will be discussing some items tonight that are very important. Does anyone have a conflict of interest to disclose? Other than myself. I got your attention, didn't it? One of the contractors who will be discussing tonight did make a contribution to my campaign several years ago. I felt it was in the best interest to not participating in the rating of the contractors. I did sit in on the meetings and listen to their proposals, but I did not participate in ranking of the contractors, although contribution wouldn't make any difference to me, but I just felt I want to avoid any perceived conflict. So there's my disclosure on that. All right, council will be looking for an action to approve the September 28th, 2021 City Council meeting minutes. Does anyone have any comments they'd like to make to Susan before we seek a motion? I don't see any, so I'd be looking for a motion to approve those minutes.
Mayor,
Have a motion by Councilmember Ekstrom. Do we have a second?
Mayor, I move that we accept September 28th, 2021 city council meeting minutes.
Are you making a second or to her motion?
I'm motioning, she's gonna second.
Either one. I said so moved and we accepted that.
Oh, I didn't hear you say.
Okay, we're starting off good tonight. So we have a motion by Councilmember Ekstrom and a second by Councilmember Severing. Is there any further discussion on the motion to approve those minutes? If not, is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor of approving the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We'll now move on to item number 5, 6, and 7. I think, Dylan, you're going to address all those. Is that true?
Yes, I can do that.
We'll make motions individually, but let's go ahead to that point.
Hello, how are you guys tonight?
We're good.
Good deal. My name is Dylan. I'm the Public Works Inspector, Superintendent. Tonight, did a couple walkthroughs for subdivisions and bringing them for conditional status to get them into the 1-year warranty. So then we can get a final and release all the escrow. The first one I believe is the Fernwood, is that?
Fernwood Site 6.
Yeah, it's a little 4-lot subdivision down on 2100 North. They had a very minimal punch list that they need to go back and fix. That's what the $8,000 will be held for, is make sure that they do those improvements. So it's a little bit different than the previous staff reports that were turned in. There's a little more financial information on there, so. I've completed a walkthrough. All the improvements are up to city code and standard.
So you're making a recommendation. We accept the conditional acceptance on that.
Yes.
All right, Dylan is recommending that. Council, do you have any questions for Dylan? All right, seeing none, I'd look for a motion to approve the conditional acceptance of Fernwood 6, Phase 6 subdivision. Do we have a motion?
Mayor. I make a
Councilmember
motion that
Stoker.
we approve the conditional acceptance of the Fernwood subdivision.
Phase 6,
Phase
okay.
6 as stated.
All right, do we have a second?
A second.
Second by Councilmember Severing. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Dylan, let's move on to item number 6, which is the Quail Ponds Phase 5 subdivision.
Quail Ponds Phase 5 is just right around the corner from Fernwood 6. The little bit of the delay from the walkthrough is they didn't have their temporary turnaround completed, so that is now constructed and up to city code and standards. So they had a couple water meters on the same property that are now moved, and all those issues are fixed. So now they're up to the city code and standard for this subdivision as well.
So you're recommending approval of that?
Yep, so get them into the 1-year warranty, and then we'll come back and do a final.
Okay. Dylan's making a recommendation, council, that we approve the conditional acceptance. Any questions for Dylan? All right, looking for a motion then to approve the conditional acceptance on Quail Ponds Phase 5.
And I move that we accept the conditional inspection and acceptance of Quail Ponds 5 as stated.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Ekstrom. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Stoker. Any further questions? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Dylan. We're on the Shoop Farm subdivision.
Awesome. This is the last one that I'm bringing tonight. It's a subdivision that was built a couple of years ago. The problem we were waiting for is there was a couple building lots that didn't have concrete. Now they've gone through and put the concrete in. So there's no reason to hold them out any longer. They have streetlights, paving, everything. So all their city improvements are up to city code and standard as well. So I'm asking again for conditional acceptance on this subdivision to start their warranty period and come back at a later time for a final.
All right, any questions for Dylan? So Dylan, are you paying real close attention to the ADA access in these subdivisions?
Yes, like every time go out there inspecting the sidewalk, making sure that they're not too sloped or.
Because you know the mayor's big on that, right? You've heard that rumor?
I've been told that a couple times now.
Okay.
Throughout my time.
That's good. I just want to make sure Dave got the message to you. And then I just have one other question, Dylan, since you're kind of a little bit nervous, so this question should lighten you up. How'd you get that color in your beard?
I have no idea. It's a thing about coloring it, but I haven't yet, but I did shave tonight, so.
Well, if you figure that out, let me know, because I'm a little bit concerned about what's happening with mine. And Dave too, look at what's happening with his. All right, council, do we have a motion to accept the conditional acceptance of Shoop Farm subdivision recommended by Dylan?
I move we accept the conditional acceptance of Shoop Farm subdivision.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Severing. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
A second by Councilmember Stoker. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good job, Dylan. I think that's it for tonight.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for all you do. All right, we'll start our active agenda this evening. We'll start with public comments, and just as a reminder, if you would step up to the podium, I guess, and speak loudly, because we don't, the microphone is there. And if you would limit your comments to 3 minutes, and if you'd state your name and if you're a resident of North Ogden. And John, if you would watch, we have some that have joined us this evening via Zoom. If you would let us know if you would like to make a comment through Zoom, please just raise your hand and John will acknowledge that, and we'll make sure we provide an opportunity to hear your comments. So now would be the time. If you have any comments regarding items or agenda this evening.
Jim Romani, live in North Ogden. If the city is considering internet or some kind of an infrastructure proposal along those lines, I would strongly advocate for some kind of fiber optic system. My experience with when I was with the Missile Defense Agency, we went through a very extensive, it was all infrastructure, okay? And we went from Ethernet cables, which, no kidding, we had tracks and tracks and tracks of Ethernet cables, like bundles this big. And we took them all out, Ethernet cable, okay? It carries so much more capacity. It's secure, it doesn't degrade over length of extension, and as far as it being an alternative to 5G or any other kind of a Wi-Fi thing, there's no comparison from a technology standpoint. Because Ethernet or fiber optic will go miles without any kind of degradation. Yeah, forgive me, I would have, if I had known this was on the agenda, my bad, I didn't look, I would have come a little bit more prepared. But, yeah, I'm not advocating for any particular provider, I'm just saying, if you have a choice of a technology solution, and Ethernet is among the choices, I think, or fiber rather, fiber, I think you couldn't go wrong.
Well,
It's difficult for me to imagine. I don't, my wife and I are both in IT, and as far as a solid infrastructure solution, there's nothing on the horizon.
okay, well, as we get further down the line, maybe we'll call upon you for a little input. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Brenda Ashdown, North Ogden. I'll do the complaining first. Road construction is great. I like the island on the end of Pleasant View Drive. There needs to be some kind of a sign for no left turn, because almost every time I've gone to Pleasant View, to Washington, from my house to turn right onto Washington, someone turns left onto Pleasant View Drive from Washington. And I listened to the meeting last week, and the guy was right. The in and out at Acre Lee's from Washington, just below Pleasant View Drive, is a nightmare. Compliment the retaining wall behind Lee's, to the side of Lee's, that they took like years before somebody finally. It looks really good. It looks really nice. It's good. Thank you.
So Brenda, thank you for your comments. We've talked about putting a sign up there, but according to Mr. Call, we can't do so because there's no place to put it. Although I did have a discussion with Mr. Call today and asked him to make sure the chief is aware of the fact, because I am seeing numerous people turn left in there. So I figure as our officers patrol that and issue citations, the word will get out. Is that no left-hand turn? And I would just remind those people, we're doing this on a test basis. If that intersection becomes unsafe, we will close Pleasant View Drive. So I hope that people understand the ramifications of not obeying the law there, but our police department will help them understand the importance of obeying that no left-hand turn on the Pleasant View Drive. So thank you, Brenda. John, do we have anyone online?
Not at this time.
Like to make a comment? Any other further comments this evening here? All right, thank you for your comments. And we will now go on to item number 9. Scott Hess, our planning director, our very good planning director, I should add, will lead us in a discussion on an action to consider a request for improvements related to the Denny Coop subdivision.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. We have a small subdivision, administrative subdivision for you. It's a little bit of a different request coming forward. Subdivisions are typically an administrative matter done through the code, with the planning commission being the land use authority for 10 lots and above, and staff being the approval authority for 10 lots and fewer, unless there's any road dedication. In this particular case, we have a 2-lot subdivision that's currently bound by 750 East, 2850 North, and the future Monroe right-of-way to the east. So this would be three-sided single lot today that there's a desire to split into 2. The code doesn't discern between small lot subdivisions and large lot subdivisions or many lot subdivisions when it comes to the improvements that are required in adjacent road right-of-ways. So this subdivision, as part of the condition of approval, would be required to put in approximately 200 feet of the length of an 80-foot right-of-way of future Monroe Boulevard. The city would participate in the center section of that from an asphalt and then underground utility services. But our code today would have from west to east the sidewalk, park strip, curb, gutter, asphalt, some central section the city pays for, and then the remainder of it moving east. For the access of lot 1, which is currently addressed off of 750 East, and then access and utility for lot 2, which would be addressed and facing 2850, Staff saw that there was some conflicts there between what the code is requiring, what our desires might be for Monroe Boulevard, and really a kind of fairness statute here in this case for what's really a small lot subdivision that doesn't need this major road right of way for access. So as part of the condition of approval, staff laid out a few potential paths forward. One, of course, would be to just put in the improvements, which would include sidewalk along 750 East on Lot 1, sidewalk along 2850 North Street for the southern frontages of Lot 1 and Lot 2, and then full improvements in Monroe Boulevard. So that's the full improvement scenario. The second scenario would be considering whether there's a way to put asphalt, curb, gutter, and sidewalk somewhere elsewhere in the city in an area that is deemed to be more beneficial to the city in lieu of those same improvements along Monroe, or some combination of the above two options. So as staff has looked at this, Monroe in this particular case between 2850 and the next connecting street to the north, which would be 3100, has some significant ownership, private property ownership still, where the city doesn't have the right of way. So whether or not it's worth having asphalt, curb, gutter sitting out there underutilized, and essentially just degrading over time, may or may not be more beneficial than something such as the sidewalk connection from 750 East along 2850 North to the east and connecting it over where the sidewalk is missing further east. So there's likely some level of kind of trading that can be done in this case. Staff we don't have the decision-making authority to do that. We administer the code as the code is written. And then there's another potential option here, two potential options that come from staff for code amendments. So one way to get around a 2-lot subdivision in this case would be to permit an accessory dwelling unit on Lot 2. However, the property owner desires a newer, modern, larger home on Lot 2. And our current accessory dwelling unit standard is a square footage base. It's a percentage base on the existing main dwelling of the property. So you have the old white farmhouse that's sitting there on Lot 1. You could build a home up to 40% of the size of that, which would be pretty limiting and be, I think, around 700 square feet is what you'd be able to build. Staff would be interested if the council wants to go this direction in looking at a way for property owners in cases like this to essentially trade what is the ADU, the accessory dwelling unit, and what's the primary dwelling to allow them to upgrade into a larger, more modern home and have the math, like the reverse math of leaving a smaller home on the property that is effectively at that point the accessory dwelling unit. And then one more is the city has considered, or at least staff, public works, engineering, and city attorney has considered what would be a future partial street ordinance, which might be deemed to be a little bit more fair in cases like this, where you'd put single-sided sidewalk, curb, gutter, and some amount of asphalt that would provide fire, life, safety access to a subdivision, but doesn't burden a small lot subdivision with necessarily the entire improvements of a full right of way. And again, there's a balancing act there of necessary access and paying for those improvements. So from staff's perspective, we'll stand behind whatever path forward the city council wants to do. You may or may not be in a position tonight to make a decision, but we did want to, just in the interest of moving this forward for the applicant, get it in front of you for consideration and have that discussion.
Thank you, Scott. I don't know if the applicant would be interested. We usually allow for the applicant to address us, to express any ideas or concerns they have. So the applicant is here. We go ahead with that. The council's in agreement.
Thanks for the opportunity to address it here. Yeah, Scott gave a great overview of what's going on here. So I'm the applicant, Denny Coop. I'm a citizen. I grew up just a block east of here. My wife grew up a block up 750 East. So we're familiar with the neighborhood, all the neighbors and everybody around. Just kind of looking for a way to build a good home for our little family. We recently purchased this property from a close family friend. And during our due diligence period, we reached out to the city to see what improvements would be needed to subdivide and eventually build a home on lot 2 there. There's currently a curb and gutter on 750 and 2850 of that property, but no sidewalk, so that was made known to us. But during that due diligence period, we weren't made known of the Monroe right-of-way that we would need to be building an 80-foot road essentially for 215 feet. Definitely is going to be a project killer if we have to do that. We're currently just remodeling this 1,200 square foot farmhouse there. Now, knowing all this, we definitely like that idea that Scott mentioned of kind of flopping that accessory dwelling unit code to allow the small house there to be the rental and then a newer modern home for us to be able to be built there. So that's where we're at. There have been other subdivisions off of this old farm property that weren't really required to do these same improvements to Monroe here. There's a 3.5 acre lot just to the east of Monroe here. They weren't required to make any improvements there, and some others up the street as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Joe, we like to be somewhat consistent in our application. Could you give us a little bit further information on his comments regarding others weren't required to comply?
Sure. So this is a little bit skewed version of the property. This is where Monroe would be going. The city owns the right of way from this point about to this fence line. The property to the east, which is that 5.5, 6 acre parcel that's owned by the Carneys, was created by the subdivision that the city caused by buying the property in the middle. And so because it's a future road project and not a current one, there was no requirement for the infrastructure to go in. There also were these two homes did amend the subdivision they were in to include property that goes back to the Monroe Boulevard right of way. That was something that happened when the Stories owned the property, and these individuals had expressed an interest in owning the properties behind them. Obviously, they just expanded their lot, so there's 2 big rectangular lots right there. Since at that time when that happened, the agreement that the Story signed with the city was that there would be no further subdivision of the land unless all subdivision improvements were installed. So they were required at the time to install the sidewalks with that subdivision. And so now what we have is a little bit unique situation where there's this piece that the Coop family has purchased. There's a chunk right here left over that I believe the Stories have sold to the Petersons, which would constitute what this sounds stronger or worse than it is, but we would call it an illegal subdivision, meaning that the Stories should have gone through the subdivision process and either by amending this subdivision that this home was in or by subdividing this property. And so that's one of the pressures that we're up against, and this consistency that, staff have wrestled with this issue for several hours, just talking about what all the options are. And so unfortunately, what's happened is that agreement between the city and the Stories that was recorded against the property, obviously, most people don't go through the title records. And so that was missed in the process. But we do have 2 issues to clean up here. One is what's happening with this little remainder parcel up here that I believe is owned by the Peterson family to the north, and then what the solution is for this property on the corner. And staff is open to some flexibility. I think Scott did a good job of indicating the types of flexibilities that the city could have. Obviously, the the counterpoint to some of this is, at some point, this road has to go in. And if it doesn't get paid for now, who pays for it and when does it get paid for? And obviously that was kind of tied into the idea of maybe exchanging improvements. So there were other improvements installed now, and then the city would take on the responsibility for this later. Or there's a myriad of things in between. The way Monroe was proposed was the city would buy the right of way, and then as property subdivided, the developers would put the improvements in. In a lot of ways, that was a benefit to the existing homeowners or landowners, because usually when they do a subdivision, they dedicate that property for free. And in this case, they were paid, granted, it was several years ago, but I believe the average was about 75 grand an acre. And I think if I remember, this piece is just over an acre total that the city purchased at that time.
So we have to clean up the situation with the stories apparently violating the agreement that it wouldn't be further subdivided.
Yes, there's that issue and we reached out to the Petersons to talk through that. And I don't think, like I said, it's not a major issue. It's just something we need to work through.
Okay, so the one question I have is, so the previous property owner on 750 where Monroe will go through, I think you said we have purchased the right of way all the way up. Were they paid for that right of way, the previous owner?
Yes, so we paid for this 80 feet. 80, I think it was like an acre and a quarter that we purchased.
Okay, so the previous owner to the Coops received money for the right of way. I'm assuming they were informed of the necessary improvements that they'd be responsible for as property owners there.
Yeah, so in the process, the acquisition agent talked with the landowners about how the road would go in and what the plan was. The city has anticipated there would be a few sections that we would just end up having to install to make connections.
Right. Because I can feel for the Coops there. I mean, a 2-lot subdivision to put in 280 feet of road is like way expensive, but it seems like, you know, the previous homeowners, property owners benefited from the right of way acquisition. And now the Coops are stuck with the expenses. Would that be a somewhat correct assumption?
I would, from the agreement that we signed with the stories, I believe, yes, that's a correct assumption.
All right, council, what questions may you have of Scott in regards to, I think he's presented some options. I'm not sure. You know, it seems like it's fairly something that needs to be digested if the staff has wrestled with it for a couple hours. Councilman Barker.
So the road's gonna get installed and it's developed, correct? But there's no one developing there. We've got one lot on the east, which is 5 acres. So who's gonna develop to put the road in?
Well,
if we don't subdivide this bottom lot, then who's gonna put the road in?
I think that's a good question. The road has to be put in, so who bears the cost of that, the city or the landowner?
And my concern is, since he wants to build a house, we're gonna make him put 200 feet of road in, but everyone else gets it put in for free around them because they're not built, or their house is already built.
John, is that?
Except for maybe the Petersons, because they don't have a house built yet.
So it is a constant battle in the city where we very often create and make some properties much easier to develop than others. A good example is if Monroe wasn't here and we didn't have to worry about it, then there's a 2-lot subdivision that only requires sidewalk because the city's already put in curb, gutter, asphalt, or whoever the previous subdivider was. And so there's always this back and forth on who puts it in, when it goes in, and staff, like Scott mentioned, is constrained by the ordinance. There are some relief valves, which is why we came to the real decision makers.
So the ultimate question here is, first of all, it's very, I can see it's very expensive for a 2-lot subdivision. However, when that road's developed, somebody bears the cost of it, right? If it's not the property owner. The thing that gets me is this was fully explained to the previous property owner. They benefited from the right-of-way acquisition, and now the Coops are stuck with all the costs, which is a little bit interesting, but boils down to, you know, who bears the burden of when the road's put in.
And that's a good point. I'm gonna put this map up because it might be a little easier to see the property lines. You know, this is the Coop property, and so if they extend the road to here to do their subdivision, then now this property owner only has to do 100 feet to get the same benefit, and the same thing on up the road. I know from a staff perspective, we've talked about if the city's the one who ends up putting the road in, essentially doing a holding strip or some sort of something that says, hey, for anyone to connect and subdivide, they need to help pay the city back for the road.
So the question is if they ever subdivide.
Right.
Councilman Barker.
In my time, through my position at the fire department and working with planning, usually developers on both sides of the road have to pay for the road. So how come we're only making one person pay for the road?
Lauren could probably provide some answer to that, but in general, most developers put the road so they're benefiting on both sides. Or they reach an agreement with the neighboring property owner to share the cost, or they put in what's called that holding strip, where they can't connect unless they pay for the portion of the road. So we've seen all three of those, but I would say in general that most people design the subdivision so they get the benefit of both sides of the road.
Good point.
So there's no benefit to, well, I don't see a benefit in the subdividing if I have to put in 215 feet of road, 80 feet myself.
Yeah, that seems pretty crazy. Any other council member Ekstrom?
And so this is an extension of Monroe that will dead end, right? We don't have access up further north. So that's gonna.
So we're missing this piece here between these two property owners opted not to sell the right of way to the city at the time. We do have it right in this area. It's not perfectly straight, but that's another section of Monroe that we own.
Okay, so is Monroe eventually going to terminate at 3100? Is that where it goes from end to end?
So it turns into 800 East and goes all the way up the hill till it hits a mountain road.
Mountain Road.
And it even extends further up. But it's 800 East is basically goes from Mountain Road to 1700 North. So it's a north-south road through the whole city,
Right.
which is why the city anticipated we would eventually probably put some sections in at our cost. Because there's some sections where there is only a house or two that won't ever subdivide.
Well, I don't see the point of putting any of Monroe paving it yet until we have, I mean, it's not accessing anything, right? We've got the Carnage will use it to get, I guess, to the rest of their property, maybe the Petersons, but why would we pave it now?
I think that's one of the suggestions is that we just trade, because at some point in time, but I think Councilman Barker has a point. I don't think the Coops ought to be stuck with both sides of the road. But I don't think it's fair too that there's no cost associated with it, because at some point in time, the city's going to be hit with it, so.
Well, and then I'm assuming the Carnies own that from that little jog over and then all the way back up. So did they bear the cost of the middle of the road over for that whole length then?
There's the trigger in this case for the improvement is the subdivision. So the Carney's property is essentially a remainder property that was an outcome of us buying the right of way. It was never part of a proper subdivision either. It was just like a piece of property the stories owned that became a remainder. And because that property owner, who now ultimately owns it, has applied for a building permit, there's no trigger between a building permit and road improvements. It's subdivision, which creates access. But typically in cases like this, the case would be clear to me as the planner that if the Peterson said, I desire a building permit there, then I need to bring Monroe up to provide access, because it's a landlocked piece of property. And the two property owners to the north as well. If they wanted to subdivide the eastern portion of their lots and obtain new building permits, then that would be the trigger to bring the access road up. But in this case, the Coops are essentially providing a road on the third leg of their lot that would ultimately provide a financial benefit to those property owners to the north. So as of right now, if the Carneys move forward with their plans of a single building permit and no subdivision, we will never have a land use trigger requirement for them to put that in. We could request like a repayment agreement or something and special service district type of thing if we put the road in. But that would really come, I think, from them gaining some sort of essential access off of Monroe to it.
So
Right.
the Peterson's access, I mean,
The Petersons, it's a series of remainder parcels is how you can think about it. The Coop property used to include that little piece to the north. And that was subdivided off probably by a simple meets and bounds description recorded at the county, and a financial transaction, not a subdivision. That's why it's technically an illegal subdivision. So you have the Carney property was one of two remainder pieces. The Petersons became a third remainder piece, and then the Coops ultimately own like the final original piece of the Story land, or originally to include that little white house. And that's, the code is subdivision is your trigger, but typically subdivision comes with, we want to subdivide lots, and those lots require frontage, and that frontage requires us to construct a street.
Which ultimately will happen when Monroe goes through, and it'll make it easier then to subdivide those once approvals given from the non-divide right now, I guess.
so kind of the crystal ball prediction is that eventually, we've got the one lot for the Petersons, but then the other lots going up are going to subdivide and then, but they're owned by individual people. So it's gonna be, they're gonna be tempted to do the same thing with the Stories did with the Petersons, in which case then there's no subdivision trigger.
Right.
Oh, this is a mess.
So Scott, will you explain for us again, at least for me, what the remedies would be to be able to help with these?
Yeah, so one was to essentially trade some level of improvement that the council feels is reasonable. So like the mayor and Councilman Barker said, it's probably not nothing, but it might not be the full improvement. We don't have that half street, or I hesitate to call it a half street, it's a partial street of improvement because fire life safety is a little wider than half the street, but it would be, maybe you exchange the sidewalk that connects from 750 along 2850. So you get a fully connected pedestrian way. That would be far less expensive for the Coops, and we would get out of it a safe routes to school pedestrian walkway. So that's one option. One we didn't talk about was like a fee in lieu or escrowing for those improvements. In cases like this, you're either dealing with putting asphalt on the ground and watching it degrade, or putting money in the bank and watching it kind of degrade too with inflation. And then the other options are to not do the subdivision, leave it as one lot, and then trade this accessory dwelling unit, essentially do an ordinance change, write in the ordinance that would permit for homeowners who have an existing home under a certain square footage or of a certain age, that they can construct a new home on their larger lots, thereby kind of flip-flopping what the accessory dwelling unit is. Because as Denny mentioned, 1,200 square feet, you can get 40% of the size of that in an accessory dwelling unit. So they could build a nice little 500 square foot. IKEA apartment. There's some really
That's
nice
a
ones.
shame.
For some reason, I don't think that's what they're after. You know,
And that's an understandable limitation of the code, given that in many cases, we have nice new large homes, and what we're desiring is this small, like mother-in-law apartment.
Right.
But we also have a lot of this historical homes on larger lots that I think you could do the reverse situation, and that would be a benefit to homeowners as
Is
well.
that something you're interested in doing?
That
So
would be our desire.
is that like your first choice of things?
Yeah.
Something to do?
Yes.
Because that
First
seems
choice
like
is
a
to
reasonable thing to do.
yeah.
And you plan on keeping that whole property?
Right, in that case, we would keep the whole property, we would rent out the house, and I think that's one of your next agenda items, right, is moderate income housing. That's one small solution to that.
Okay, I don't know. Okay, so my opinion, I would do the swap of the accessory dwelling unit and then do the sidewalk. That's,
Yeah, and-
I think that would be a great.
So then there's the rub though, is that it then it's a building permit. So we don't have the same trigger for improvements, which means we'll have to look at our street safe standards. We may or may not even be able to get the sidewalk on 2815 750 at that point. So there's just, it's nuanced in what the code requires.
Council, if I could make a suggestion that maybe we table action on this tonight, I'd like to maybe have Scott and Lauren give us an estimate of what the coops are facing in cost right now. If everything were required, and then come back and hopefully the council can come up with something that's modified, that's fair to both parties in regards to maybe improvement somewhere else, but I agree it doesn't make sense to put a partial road in there and make it impossible for the coops to accomplish what they'd like to accomplish. So if we could get an idea and then come up with something that's fair, if that would be acceptable to the council or whatever you'd like to do. If you'd like to table this tonight, I'd look for a motion to table to get that information. If not, if you want to act tonight, that's up to you.
Okay, my question is, how soon are you wanting to move forward with building your new house?
Thank you for asking that. That's kind of the essence right now. We want to, if possible, get moving forward on a build. As soon as possible. We're currently living in my parents' home. They're gone on a mission, so it's kind of a timeline. So as soon as possible. and for that sake, the accessory dwelling unit swap is kind of, we like that idea.
Okay, so is your intention to remodel that 1,200 square foot and live in it for a bit, or?
We're currently remodeling it right now.
Remodeling it?
And our hopeful idea is that we'll put it up for rent when the remodel is done. And
Okay, but never actually live in it yourself?
not currently the plan.
Okay, but if your parents get off the mission.
Right. If
You
the
may
time
be
doesn't
there.
work out, we might have to, right.
Gotcha. Okay, so I guess that just puts it on to staff to try to find something that we can do to help them as soon as possible.
And you could do both things. You could table the item, we can bring back the costs. And if you as the council desire staff to look into an ordinance like that and provide that direction to us, then we'll jump on that as well. So.
Do you have any motions, council?
I motion that we table this issue.
You have a motion?
That Scott staff will get back to us as quickly as possible with this information for a future quick city council meeting.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by council member Exum. Any discussion? All in favor of tabling item number 8, say aye.
Aye.
And okay, it's unanimous, and I feel for you. I've been trying to get a house started for 7 months.
That's number 9.
Oh, number 9. It's not that good with numbers.
Shouldn't have a microphone.
Okay. All right, so I feel for you. I'm also facing the same issue on a accessory dwelling unit, so we'll get on it. Scott, if you could get back to us.
Okay, thank you.
So, okay, we'll table item number 9 then. All right, Scott, you're on for number 10 regarding approving the moderate income housing for our city.
So in 2019, legislature passed Senate Bill 34, which required modifications to our moderate income housing plan. And in 2019, the city completed a revision to the moderate income housing plan that met the requirements of SB 34, which was largely, in addition to using some Department of Workforce Services tables, provided tables, was choosing menu items off of a list the state legislature produced that the cities worked on that would create opportunities for moderate income housing. That plan can live for 5 years, but it was determined with the General Plan Advisory Committee and their work that we had some missing gaps in that plan. There were things that we had identified in 2019 that when we reported on them in 2020, realized there are things we aren't going to do. So to just, instead of leave that plan kind of undone or something we're not going to take any action on, staff did a combination this year. We've already provided the Department of Workforce Services the required report, which is annually required before December 1st of each year. And then we have updated the moderate income housing plan. So I think that this is probably smart to do in a city that's growing at, we've done 10% growth over 2 years, probably more often than 5 years. So this is something we'll continue to keep our finger on the pulse of. But I left you the red line version of the 2019 moderate income housing plan to the 2021, just so you can see where some of those changes are. So in 2019, we reported 6,000 residential units. This is a pretty simple way to get this calculation, but it's calling Public Works and getting all of our water connections, culinary water connections. And today we have 6,665. So we've increased by over 10% our number of water connections. And in a large number, we've increased those in multi-unit, multi-family unit numbers. So we had between Village of Prominence Point, we have Cooperstown apartments coming on, and a few others that have been approved. We have kind of waiting in the background this large number of multi-family units that are now ramping up and beginning to come on. So we moved from 19.3% of North Ogden City housing stock in 2019 as some sort of attached housing is now 26.8%. So we're over 25% in attached housing. I think that's a good thing. I think it provides a housing choice for people, and to a large degree, it ultimately will have an impact on affordability, because what everywhere needs right now in Utah is just more units. We need more stock. But housing in North Ogden is typically very high end, and those units, even those attached units, go for top of market prices. So we haven't been creating any problem areas or issues. We just really have a new underlying housing stock of expensive attached units. John wrote the plan in 2019, did an excellent job pulling together a whole source of American community surveys and other HUD data. But the state now gives us the charts that we have to use for this. So we've put in those charts that Department of Workforce Services provides. And the data is kind of interesting. It's a little bit difficult to interpret, and this is based off of 2017 data. So we won't see these updates until the next full census, probably. But right now, there's on page 11 of my packet, page 36 of my packet, page 10 of this particular item. It basically says that we're meeting our requirement for affordable housing. So if you scroll down to the green and pink tables, John, what this is saying is that we have available units for renter households. We basically have 0 available at 80% of area median income, meaning that they're all rented out, but we're not woefully under providing. And then we get a little bit worse as we go down. So we have a need for 60 units of less than 50% area median income and 35 units for 30% area median income. And those numbers, when you compare where 21,000 people, are rounding errors. And so it's difficult for staff to interpret this data and say whether we are or are not providing actually for our residents. And it might be worth going out and doing what John had done and doing kind of a deeper dive into some of the other charts and graphs and statistics. But I spoke with a network of other planners, and they're grappling with the same thing, and it's kind of region specific. So for Weber County, as you're outside of Ogden, it seems like those cities are shown to be providing the moderate income housing they need to be. And as you ramp up into more urban areas like Salt Lake Valley, the numbers get really, really skewed that, for one community who has about 10,000 total building units, they said they needed to provide 10,000 units of affordable housing. So basically every unit in their house or in their community is unaffordable to at least that 80% of area median income, which is not the place that we are right now, but it's kind of interesting from a data standpoint. At any rate, the plan has been updated. We'll, if the council chooses to accept this or are making recommendations, we'll clean up all these red lines and put it into the nicer, more graphic oriented version that's on our website and then get it posted.
John, you have a comment?
Yeah, just council, I think we do expect some additional legislation on this in the near future because as Scott said, every planner, every person who's trying to write these is struggling with the information and at least we are focused on it. And we, in our city, we've had a lot of good conversations, but information just doesn't come quickly. Even the information that we used for the report a couple of years back, it was the same thing. It was 4 to 5 years old because it all comes from the feds through the census and it's just slow getting processed and out to the community. So
it seems like it's going to get worse, John, with housing prices accelerating like they are and wages not keeping up. The moderately priced housing, affordable housing is going to be a real challenge.
Yeah, you are 100% correct, Mayor.
In our state. And, it's nice for the legislature to sit down there and legislate things, mandated programs that are unfunded. It makes it a little bit difficult, but Scott, that's a good job on putting that together. Any questions for Scott, council, on that? Councilmember Ekstrom?
So are we in compliance with what the legislature is at least attempting to do with what we can report to them right now? Is that,
Yeah.
And then what's their stick? If we don't do it, what are, do they have a penalty for us if we can't?
So if we don't have an adopted moderate income housing plan, then they'll take away the Utah Department of Transportation Surface Transportation funds, which would be funds that would improve 2600 Washington Boulevard. Essentially, the project we just had would have been on hold. And then UDOT comes and holds your feet to the fire as the city, saying you're holding up, tens of thousands of trips a day because of this issue that you're not providing. So that's their stick right now.
Okay.
And then it's things like the legislature continuing to dabble in land use law and taking away our ability to put design standards on single family homes or other things. So I imagine it's going to continue to come down the line. The one thing I didn't mention were the menu of options, and the council planning commission, general plan advisory committee talked about this, but I'll just run through them really quickly. There's a handful. One, we would like to add rezone for densities necessary to assure the production of modern income housing. The reason I grabbed that is because I think we're already doing it, and so you get to capture, in work that we're already doing, you get to capture that benefit, and I get to report on it annually. The next, which was in the plan, was create or allow for and reduce regulations related to accessory dwelling units in residential zones. The legislature kind of threw every city like a guinea with that one by requiring it. G is encourage higher density or moderate income residential development near major transit investment corridors. That's a specific defined term by the state, this major transit investment corridor. It means front runner or commuter rail. So commuter rail or light rail, which we don't have. But what it means for us is we're going to encourage higher density or moderate income residential around our active thriving bus lines and try to bolster those and help them out. The next is implement zoning incentives for low to moderate income units and new developments. And preserve existing moderate income housing. That's sort of a two for the preserve existing moderate income housing would be how do we continue to maintain the those areas of older existing housing stock in our communities by making sure their infrastructure is good and sidewalk is connected and parks are still provided in those areas and not let those areas degrade. We opted to remove utilized strategies that preserve subsidized low to moderate income housing units on a long-term basis. We don't have any state subsidized units. Preserve existing moderate income housing, we recommended to include and then participate in a community land trust program for lower moderate income housing. There are programs out there where a third party or nonprofit owns the land and then sells somebody the structure, and they sell it to them at a reduced amount of appreciation, so they can still have appreciation, but then they sell the structure to another income qualifying family. So someone basically holds like a 99-year land lease, and when you take out $125,000 in underlying unimproved acre, you can drive the cost of housing down while still building housing that fits into your neighborhoods. So that's something that's worth exploring. It's not saying that staff isn't recommending we're doing this, but by putting it in the plan, now we have a year that we can explore options for it and report on it next year.
Well, Scott, I was just gonna say the last option would have to be a not-for-profit entity, because otherwise the landowner's gonna want to capture a return on that 99-year lease. And, you know, the thing that's discouraging is even when we have allowed higher density, those homes or those units have become non-affordable. I mean, they're selling for $400,000 for a 1,300 square foot unit. Rent's $1,600 to $2,000. So even with this higher density, we have not created affordable housing. And I think that's something the legislature is going to have to address, because land prices in our state are just out of control, frankly. And I always laugh when somebody brings up affordable housing, because nobody can define that for me other than this table here. And so anyway, good work on that.
Thank you. The last one we're recommending take out, and I wish we wouldn't have, was implement a mortgage assistance program for employees of the municipality. That provides contractor services. So, you know, that would have been great. But again, it was determined in 2020, we don't have the funding to do that. So we're not going to keep it in the plan. And then we have kept in apply for or partner with outside agencies. And there's a whole list of those from item P through U of possible things we can look at. So this is, the menu item is exactly that. It's not the mandates that we're going to do. It gives us options for what to look into. And then we report annually on this. So if this plan lives for 5 years, we'll do 5 annual reports on it, and then it would be updated at the end of that time frame.
One of the things that has discouraged me a little bit in trying to have affordable housing things is I really feel like anybody that works in North Ogden City should be able to afford to live in North Ogden City. So, but you know, as Mayor has pointed out, our property prices here are so outrageous.
Right.
I mean, I've got young adults living in my basement that I would really love to have close by, but I can't come out into an affordable place to live. And, you know, so we're just trying to, you know, as housing prices go up and inflation goes up, and then we kind of keep the city's budget, it's quite the numbers crunch.
Scott, just for clarity, we are in compliance still right now.
Yeah, so we've submitted the report. The report is accepted. And so as far as I know from David Fields at the Department of Workforce Services, we are in compliance. And I haven't heard UDOT tell us that we're the stopping point in getting federal or state funding for transportation. So
We just don't want to leave the impression with the citizens that
yeah,
there's not going to be any more road money available for.
No.
All right, any further questions for Scott? If not, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the moderate income housing for North Ogden that was buried in the 300 and odd pages in our packet. Do we have a motion to approve that?
Mayor, I move that we approve the moderate income housing plan as presented by Scott Hess.
Thank you. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing. Any further discussions or questions for Scott? If not, all in favor of approving the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any objections? All right, motion passes unanimously. We'll go on to now item number 11, which is a discussion to consider the code rewrite for chapters 11 and 12 that were included in your packet. I'm sure everyone read all 200 plus or.
We're going to tonight, so this is buckle up. We're gonna just go through. So the last, this started, it's file number 2019-06. So it started almost 18 months ago. We had brought a consultant online to look at reorganizing our Title 11, which is our zoning code, and our Title 12, which is our subdivision code, to bring that more in compliance with other municipal codes and eliminate them as two separate sections, make it one Title 11 that's zoning and subdivision, and then to reorganize it. So we've had a lot of code changes in the last 6 months while I've been here, and so they're living documents, but that also kind of makes them messy over time. And the reorganization, it really isn't a rewrite as much as it's a reorganization. So it took sections that had, that were duplicates in some cases or duplicating language, pulled all of those into one. And the way that this was reviewed is basically there's 4 sections now of the code, and you can find basically one for one, a Title 11 and 12 reference for something that's in the new code. So these were the short versions, and I'm not going to read all of these, but there was like a 1-page synopsis for each section of what you did. And then I just want to point out that Planning Commission gave staff a little bit of leeway in this to update the Title 11 reorg that's been in process now for over a year with some of the code changes that we've done over time. So, every time we've just done, we just did all of the accessory building standards. Those weren't necessarily reflected in the Title 11 reorganization code because that was reviewed 6 months ago. So staff went backwards through all of our zoning code changes back to 2019 and has attempted to redline this with all of those amended changes. And then would just essentially not caution the council, but just let you know that we're likely to find errors and omissions. That's just the nature of this. And we will do our best to batch any of those changes and bring them forward as these things were left out of the code, or we undid legislation that we've taken care of since that time. And we'll bring those back to the council in a hopefully a kind of responsive manner, but also in a way that doesn't just flood the Planning Commission and Council with changes over the next 6 to 12 months. But I would expect that's in our future. And then also we chatted, John and I talked a little bit earlier today and talked about if there's an issue that we had made a code change on that we know was legal code in the city, that we maybe are able to work with property owners under that assumption or that previous code while we correct something. So we can kind of like help people move applications forward. But if we have some glaring miss, accident, deleted something, that we can keep kind of moving that forward. But I've done one read through of this, and I have another one to do because there's still references that are missing. So no action is being recommended tonight. It's really get it in front of you all and consider it, ask any questions that you have, and then we'll fine tooth comb, go through it and bring it back in 2 weeks for hopeful action.
So you'd like the council to ask any questions they found in the reading of the several hundred pages of the code.
There's a note in there that I'll give you $100 if you read it, found it. Anyone found it?
So what would you like from us tonight, Scott?
It's from a staff perspective, it's a really large deal because it's 250 pages. We know it's overwhelming for anybody to sit down and read. But just want to reiterate that we had a great consultant, had an excellent consultant team, and the code isn't substantively different than what we have now. It's just going to be better, easier to utilize. It will be clearer. For instance, if you have a standard that's related to a commercial requirement, those are all now in line in one spot. Or residential inline in one spot instead of having 25 different sections that are called standards that relate to other, other zones or something. We have, which is just the way codifying goes. So we're comfortable with it. We just want you to feel comfortable with it because this is about 50% of the municipal code is the land use portion. And
So sometime they'll be bringing that back to us for approval
hopefully in 2 weeks, December 15th.
in 2 weeks. So that gives us some time to digest a little bit further.
Yep.
Scott, how would you assess our success? We ask our code to be simplified, so it's not so hard on our citizens and businesses. How would your assessment be of simplification in this?
I live in it, so it's not that complicated to me, but it certainly is, when you read it, it makes a lot more sense to me now because you have like section 1 now is all procedural stuff. And section 2 is all of your zones and their subsequent requirements. And then there's a portion that's all on subdivision stuff. So I think it's just easier to get through there. Now that I'm used to portions of the code that were kind of like breadcrumbs we had to find, we'll have to relearn those. So staff will have our own learning curve in the new code. But ultimately, I think that it's a simpler code.
I like how you qualified the simpleness on your approach. I think what we'll do is ask the chief to go through the 250 pages and from his perspective and tell us if he thinks it's simplified.
I'll send you a question. If you can find, find where the requirement is during a subdivision that you improve the street next to it. If you can find that, then the code is simple.
Okay.
And Mayor, not shorter is not always simpler, but I believe we've shaved about 100 pages out of the code.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of restatements and just clarifications, but that, it used to be 350 pages and now it's 250. So that means Scott's job just got a third easier.
There you go.
Great.
Way easier.
Maybe there could be a recommendation of more understandable terminology. That I think too can sometimes be a challenge is there's just certain vocabulary that is used in these kind of situations that you kind of go, okay.
Yeah, I think, well, a handful of years ago when Utah State transitioned to the Land Use Development Management Act, this was in 2007, actually, the LEDMA, there was a huge push to make it plain language. It should be plain language. The state legislature has pushed that somebody should be able to read it and reasonably interpret it. It shouldn't take a law degree to interpret land use code. So hopefully that's, but again, I live in it and John lives in it. And so we read it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But that's a good perspective. And if
that is,
as you review, if you see a word that, hey, even in the future, it's always easy to go back, not easy, but we can go back and make the language understandable to people who don't play in this code all day.
Good.
When we think about writing this for the citizens to understand, you take it through their perception, not their perception.
That's why we're going to have the chief review it. Give us his comments, Councilmember Severin, being a non-planning. Good. All right, well, we'll be prepared then for 2 weeks for you to come back and if you can incorporate some of the things that we talked about tonight in regards to simplicity and understanding, that'd be good. Thank you for your good work on that.
Okay, a quick question, Scott. So are you gonna have it for us in 2 weeks so that we'll have maybe just 200 pages to read?
no, at this point, I'm not cutting any more out of it. At this point, it's just, and the planning commission passed it essentially how it is, but with the caveat that you can update those sections you've updated. So we've done fencing standards, clear view triangle, accessory building standards, commercial signage, those have just been in the 6 months I've been here. So we've incorporated that, but I'm not shortening it at this point anymore.
So, but you would like to have read?
No, don't. I mean, I just want you to feel comfortable with what's in there. So look through it and
like was saying, like, well, if I read it and I understand it, then that's going to give a better perspective about whether or not it's written to the point that, of course, I have been accused of not exactly speaking in layman's terms all the time either, so I don't know if I'm the best one to read it either. But I don't necessarily live and play in that language, and so I think if I'm reading it, then it might be a good idea for me to just say, I don't get this, and circle some things, and say, okay, explain this to me, and then maybe we can come up with some language that might be.
It might be very difficult for staff at this point in time to go back and do that. Maybe the answer is, we have some addendums to the technical aspect where it's put in language that the citizen can refer to. I'm just thinking at this point in time, it'd be very, very difficult for staff to go back but I do agree that we want to make this understandable to those who use it. So, all right, good comments. Thank you, Scott. We're now going to hear from John Call, our city manager and attorney. He's going to lead a discussion on an action to consider the selection of the contractor and architect for the public safety building. I will also be calling on Council Member Stoker, who sat on that committee and represented the council there. And I know we have Mayor Chug with us tonight, who was the chairman of the Public Safety Building Committee. So we have a good range of people to talk with this evening. This is obviously something that's extremely important to our city, and would probably be, I think, probably the largest expenditure, John, that the city has incurred to date.
Yes.
So if you have any questions, council, now would be the time to ask those questions as John leads the discussion. So John.
Thank you, Mayor. So obviously, council, you have discussed this quite a bit, or just been aware of it. So I'm just going to do a quick update. So if anyone's watching for the first time, they'll know what we're talking about. But about 24 months ago, it was identified that this new police station was a high priority for the city. And so at that point, the council started talking about budgeting for some analysis to be done by some outside professionals on what the city needed, what type of space we needed, where it should be. And so that was budgeted in the spring, almost 2 years ago. We spent that money, hired a firm to do the work, and they came back with a recommendation of about a 24,000 to 26,000 square foot building, which would include new facilities for court, police, extra security measures, things like evidence storage lockers, and just basically an enhancement to provide our officers with a modern facility that would meet the needs of a modern police department.
Emergency operations.
And yeah, and also meet the goals of having an emergency operations center. To put that into perspective, currently the existing police station is I hate to say it's the oldest building that the city owns, because there are a few older than that, but we don't use them currently for daily use. But to compare it to other police facilities, it is woefully structurally scary, for lack of a better word. Not that it likely would, depending on the earthquake size, not that it, everything has potential to harm people, but it would become unusable in the event of an earthquake that hit the fault line here in our area. A good example is Tooele just finished their facility when we had our little shake last year, early in the morning, and they were 2 weeks away from moving in, and their old facility, they couldn't use it, so they had to move in immediately. So they had to go in to their brand new facility, which held up just fine compared to their old one. And so this facility will be designed as a category 4, which means it'll outlast most buildings in the city, if not all the buildings, so that we have a base of operations for emergencies. The city council put together a public safety building committee that's met, I believe, 12 times to talk about it. They've gone and viewed facilities. They've talked about what we need. They went through the scoping study that was done by that third party, and ultimately culminated in the city putting out a request for proposals back in the end of August, early September, or beginning of September. And the city received or that proposal was based on what's called the design build, meaning an architect and a contractor came in together with the hopes of value engineering a facility. The original estimate from the scoping study was that the total cost with land acquisition and other things, I believe, was $12.5 million. So we have, through the process and through some of the discussions, received 2 proposals from 2 very reputable contractors and paired up with architects. The council received those. The reasons those documents haven't been released in full to the public is twofold. One is business protection, so that people aren't able to cheat off each other, for lack of a better word. And then the second component, which is really the most important, is the security. So there will be things in this facility that we won't want to be common knowledge to the general public. You know, where's our holding cells, how the security process works. And so even when those documents are released, and ultimately when construction happens, there will be some information that's somewhat withheld from the public for security reasons, just for that perspective. But 3 weeks ago, the selection committee met, interviewed the 2 firms, and then they went through a process where the, maybe I should stop talking there and let Cheryl talk about the process. And, you know, between her and Mayor Chug, talk about the recommendation of where we should go from here. Any questions about all the background? And I understand, you know, it was partially for posterity as much as it was for the council. So.
And John, I would like to add to your comments that we did hold numerous open houses. We have tried to be extremely transparent in this project. I would also say, as much as we would have liked a true design build, we really didn't get that because of the condition of the market today. Very difficult to do. So, Councilmember Stoker, I have the great pleasure of sitting by your side during this process. I would like you to kind of report on maybe the process and the recommendation from the committee, and you're welcome to call on Mayor Chug as you feel necessary. He's all prepared, I can see.
Yes, hopefully he'll fill in the blanks where I miss. We did meet and interview the 2 candidates that had sent in bids. And we did discuss it in great length and had questions for them. And they did the proposals that we got. One was very much in detailed, and they answered everything that we would put in our RFP. And the other one was not as entailed, and some of the things they missed that we wanted in it. And so in asking them questions and discussing the different things that we wanted and questions we had and clarification on things, the one came back, I think, John, the questions were put out on like the next morning. And then they answered back like within Friday, they had the answers back to us. And the other one, they took a little more time in getting back with the questions. The one was definitely more knowledgeable. Their experience was more. The other one was more experienced in other areas, but they had not done a police station. They had done a jail, but they had not done a police station. And so they were good at what they do, but in the committee's opinion, and after discussing it and seeing the results and everything, they just didn't have the expertise that we were looking for in this public safety building, and especially with the money that we're bonding and asking all of us to pay for. And so after again much discussion on these selections, and we did do choice by rank by choice. And definitely the one came out a lot higher than the other one. And so, Mayor Chad, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to it.
No, you're doing very well. Both of them are excellent contractors, yes. And we're very pleased that they were willing to bid. And we were happy with what they presented to us. And we just made the selection based on one had a lot more experience with building police station.
Yeah, I think one good thing is, that gave us some level of comfort is the bid prices weren't significantly different. Sometimes when you get proposals, you see a large difference. And so we think the cost has been somewhat verified based upon the bids, but would you mind, Councilmember Stoker, if I ask the police chief, who will be utilizing this building probably more than any, to allow him to comment before the council, since he suggested that we name the building after him, so. Go ahead, chief.
I think Councilwoman Stoker kind of nailed it. It was just obvious that one of these contractors has quite a bit more experience in these facilities. That I think it goes back about 30 years. And it's in, I mean, the teams, how many of these facilities they built, if not more. And the other one, didn't quite meet a whole lot of our criteria that we put in the RFP. And even when we did the interviews and they responded with some follow-up, it was still pretty evident the lack of experience they have in these facilities. I have no doubt that they are a great contractor and could build facilities that they're familiar with, but it was just obvious that the one that came out on top was, in my opinion, are going to meet our needs.
Thanks, chief. Councilmember Stoker, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
So I recommend who?
You want to make a recommendation? I think we're looking for a motion to approve, as I understand it, Big D as the contractor, and their partner, JRC Architects for the public safety building. So, you'd like to make a motion or just a recommendation and let somebody else make the motion? That's up to you.
Probably since I sat on the committee, I probably should let somebody else make the motion, but I strongly recommend the council the committee is strongly selected Big D to be the contractor on this project.
Council members, do you have any additional questions or comments before we entertain a motion?
I would just make a comment as I went through the bids. I was much more impressed with the thoroughness of Big D. Just as someone that's not necessarily in construction, but they gave me a high level of confidence in their expertise, their thoroughness, their skills at both putting a presentation together and, just ultimately, I think building is a real good quality facility.
One thing we should mention, as you looked at their proposal, initially the building just had a certain amount of brick. For the price that they quoted, they have agreed to make the facility entirely brick based upon using king-size bricks. So I think that'll give us some long-term maintenance opportunities too. All right. Would anyone like to make a motion to accept Councilmember Stoker's recommendation to engage Big D and JRCA to help us build this building?
So moved.
Have a motion by Councilmember Swanson. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any further questions? I will then take a roll call vote on this action. Councilmember Severing.
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson.
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
And Councilmember Stoker.
Yes.
All right, John, that would give you the leeway to finalize the contract, which we would like to put as a high priority on your many list of things to do. Since interest rates are kind of on the rise, we'd like to have a signed contract before we consider entering into a bond. So.
And Mayor, I think we'll do it in two steps. One will be the notice to proceed to basically give us a very firm document on pricing, so that if there is a change in materials, say metal, that's unexpected and outside of what the contract anticipates, that we have something to measure it against. But so I think there'll be two contracts that'll happen, but both, they'll work together so well that it won't slow us down at all.
Yeah, we've got a fairly good sized contingency, I think, in the bid. So as long as you have those done by Friday, that'll be good, John.
Okay.
All right. We'll move on to item number 13 now, which is a discussion or action to consider selecting the amount for a private placement bond. I know we have Jamie here with us tonight. We've spent some time kind of going through and accumulating funds that we can inject into this project to minimize the bonding that the city will incur. So John, let's go ahead and begin that discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. So what the council has seen in the past is we had this discussion with Mark Anderson here at the last meeting, as we were getting pricing for an $8 million bond. And with that, the interest rate was just under the current market, just under 2%. I believe it's 1.97346821. But that's a 20-year bond with a payment over the next, it's actually, the payment happens over the next 22 years because the bond, there's a delay in when you get the money from when the first payment is due, but it is a 20-year bond. The nice thing about this private placement is that if the city didn't use all the money that we borrowed, we could pay back some, and they do what's called a strip call, where they would reduce the principal across the entire amount and all the payments would go down, as opposed to after that, if we did any sort of a payment, it would apply to the next payment. So you couldn't reduce the total debt, you would just reduce the upcoming principal and interest payment. We do have Mark Anderson on Zoom, as well as obviously Jamie's in the room, and Jamie understands finances more than I do. We've put together a list of funding sources, as well as projects that are happening in the next several years. And the idea being that comparing where we're at with fund balances and available dollars to where we need to be, and how do we get there? And so to ruin all the surprise and everything, the recommendation is that in theory, this is the amount of money that the council would need to bond for, based on a construction price of the building. This is total all costs of roughly $10.5 million. That, like I said, that's a little bit higher. It's lower than what the estimate was from what the council received through the feasibility study. And it's higher than the bid from the contractor, because we've included the costs and things that are going into the project, like the home that we acquired just east of the city hall that will need to be demolished for this. The cost to demolish that home and some of those other things. The majority of the items are included in that 9.6 from Big D, including a contingency of roughly 450,000. They also included some impact or some fees that the city will have to pay to itself, specifically impact fees. So the city is not able to waive fees or impact fees. We can waive other fees, but there's also some special inspection fees and others that will come into there. But the recommendation is that the council bond for something more than this number. And I think the recommendation, as we've talked about, it is for $6,750,000. So it gives us another little cushion, just because there will be unexpected things that happen.
John, if I could just point out from our discussion, that is the recommendation to bond at $6,750,000. If you go over on the other side here, you can see the bid amount, which does include a substantial contingency that we're hoping we won't have to use in its entirety. The $400,000, I think, is a little bit high on the property acquisition, John. We didn't pay that for the home. And you can see there, we've added to the bid $150,000 for a generator. this is going to be our emergency operating center. We surely would like to have power to it when we use it. Our estimate on that for a generator is 150. And then knowing how construction is going today, we put in 350,000 for unknowns. Not that we will use that, but I think we'd rather, under the conditions, bond for more, knowing that we can repay it, than less and then have to come up with additional money. Just a couple things to point out on the projects for use. The council has at this point in time, and we'll be hopefully discussing next Tuesday, further policies regarding the fund balance. We felt like we should leave $1 million in our capital projects fund, not knowing what might become available. We want to have the opportunity to act on that. You can see the community pond, which is still waiting to be approved. That's the $1,650,000, but up above, you'll see that we're looking for a grant of $825,000. So we've tried to include all the commitments we know that we have here. And I think the other thing, John, we might want to point out is the fund balance up at the top, $350,000. The council has agreed to maintain at least a 15% balance in our general fund of unrestricted funds. So we are planning on taking it down to that 15% level so that we don't have to bond for as much. So you'll notice that number. And then there's another $250,000 in here for resale of property. That's the piece of property just here to the west. We do have a significant amount of interest in that for a price much higher, but it's not sold till it's sold, right? Council Member Severing. And so we've reduced that, giving us a little room in that regard. So just to point out some of those things that we have, and we're very confident based upon what we're seeing this year in regards to revenues coming in and our great department heads holding the line on expenses. We feel very comfortable meeting our goal of having excess revenues over expenditures this year of the 500,000. But I would like to compliment the finance team and our department heads who have understood the necessity for this building and have helped us accumulate these funds over the last couple of years to make this project possible. If we borrow the $6,750,000 as proposed here, the payment will drop to a little over $400,000 a year on the bond, principal and interest, which we feel is very within our ability to meet that obligation. So just adding a little color to that. Councilmember Swanson, did you have I thought I saw you wanting to make a comment there.
Nope, just listening.
All right.
So can I have two things, Mayor?
Well, let me check with the council. What do you think? I think you're on. Go ahead, Jay.
So there's also other components that will come into this, but one thing is, I should probably clarify that what we're asking for is an amount to the city of $6,750,000. There's a little bit of cost associated with issuing the bonds that we would just wrap into that. So it'll be a little bit higher than the $6,750,000. It's about $35,000 worth of legal work and stuff. And then we also, because this is a new facility, nice thing is we actually have another funding source that will be coming online, which is a public safety impact fee. Currently, new homes pay for a fire safety fee, and this will be a police safety fee that will help us recoup some of the cost of this building by the new homes as they come into the city. So we have an additional funding source that isn't here because we don't have any money, but as we work with that, with the consultant over the next 6 months or so, we'll have some additional money we can count on annually to help make that bond payment.
John, I believe the 35,000 is in the building cost already.
Oh, right. Yes, it is. That's correct.
But I think, 6,750,000 would make sense, give us a little bit of additional cushion. And once again, any money that's not expended would be returned. But I think this meets the commitment we made to the citizens in two areas, is to make sure the building is adequate, but is not palatial. I think it's the proposal, if you have a chance to look at it, is a nice building, but it's not excessive. It meets the needs as outlined by the police department. I think additionally, we made a commitment to try to minimize the amount we would borrow. I think we've met that commitment too. So any questions, council, as we enter into any questions? We have Mark Anderson on the phone, who's with Zions Bank, that's helping us.
John, what would the interest rate be?
Go ahead, council member Severing.
Oh, sorry.
So it is shown right here. The true interest cost is coming in at just below 2%. So it's 1.9772694.
Thank you.
But that will vary until we lock in the rate, which we can lock in for 30 days, correct?
So they actually when they gave us this quote for last meeting, they are holding this rate as long as we close by December 16th. And so we'll be able to stick with that. Mark, raise your hand if I'm incorrect on that. But the caveat is when we close, we get the money. So we'll get the money in December. And then the double caveat is that's not the way normally, I mean, it is the way things normally happen. But for us, it's actually quite beneficial because some of the lead items or some of the items we're going to need for the facility will be 9, 10, 12 months out. This will allow us to get the money, start ordering those items and get them on their way. Because some of the construction items are just so far out that if we don't order them now, we won't get them in time. Because the construction timeline is about 12 months from groundbreaking to doors open. So
we will be borrowing money at just under 2%, sticking it in probably the fund earning 25 basis points.
Yeah, so there'll be a little offset to that, but I think we'll see that coming through, and then yeah, that's.
But rates seem to be on the incline, so.
Yeah.
Councilmember Severing.
Two questions while I have the opportunity. So amortized over how many years?
20.
20, and then and what was my second question? Prepayment? We could prepay it. Is there any kind of prepayment fee?
There's not a prepayment penalty. So this was why the council, I think, selected the private placement, is there's not a prepayment penalty. The public placement bonds, typically there's a 10-year protection period, but you can't pay them off. So we get a little bit better rate with those, but the flexibility is better. I think that by the time you worked it all out, it was the city's saving, or we're spending about 40,000 more over the life, but we get the option of being able to pay it off early, which could save us, $100,000.
So we don't have to report annually, incur the costs and all the underwriting costs. So we actually felt we'd come out a little bit better with this program. So
yeah.
Any other questions? All right, I'd be looking for a motion to authorize John to proceed with issuance of a $6,750,000 bond. Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move that we approve the private placement bond for $6.75 million.
All right, we have a motion. Second by Council Member Severing. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, then I think this is important enough. I'm going to do a roll call vote, so you can go on record of where you stand on this. So Council Member Stoker.
Yes.
Council Member Swanson.
Yes.
Council Member Extra.
Yes.
Councilmember Severing,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously. It's been a long road, chief, but I think we're there now. We'll get construction started as soon as we can for our great police force, so.
I just gotta tell you, we gotta start over because Scott just told me he wants his office over there now.
Oh, wait, it's built out of concrete.
Yeah. And there is a room on the roof, Scott, so we can maybe accommodate you there. All right, we'll now enter into item 14 on our agenda. We're going to have some council member reports. We'll start with Councilmember Stoker, who will update us on things she feels going on in the police department. We'll then go to Councilmember Ekstrom, who will talk to us about what's going on in Parks and Recreation. Then Councilmember Swanson will update us on the city's finances. So Councilmember Stoker.
Thank you, Mayor. We do have a new police officer that started the police academy a few weeks ago, and she will graduate in March. And also, some of our officers will be doing, which thank you very much to our officers for doing this. They will be doing extra shifts during the holidays and keeping us all safe on the roads, and they will definitely be looking for DUIs. So please don't drink and drive, that goes without saying. And also it's a time too, when you're shopping and you have to put your presents in the car, it's a good time for crimes of opportunity. Please make sure you keep your shopping things out of sight and don't leave them in your cars. And obviously it goes without saying, don't leave your cars running and please lock them. And also a few weeks ago, this is the best part. I had a chance to do a ride along with one of our new officers, Officer Matea. And we mostly were watching, he was looking for traffic violations as far as like headlights out, tail lights out, stuff like that. So we pulled over a few, and it was interesting to watch him as he would approach the cars. And the best part was I got to watch it on camera and hear what was being said and exchanged. And he was, I was very impressed with his approach and his demeanor when he talked to those that he had pulled over. He was non-threatening, non-posturing. I can't think of a better word to say, but just very polite. And so because of his actions, those that he pulled over were very respectful and compliant with what he was asking them to do and telling them why he pulled them over. And of course, he just gave warnings, no tickets, but we did get a speeder. So, but he was also okay after explained why he got pulled over for speeding. And because he had hit the brakes and tried to slow down, he knocked the speed down a little bit for him. But the best part was we got a medical call. And I'm telling you, those lights went on, sirens went on, and the pedal went to the metal. And I can tell you, there are not enough crap bars in a police car when they're going that fast. And it gave me a new perspective of officers and what they face every day when they turn on those lights and sirens. I was amazed at how many cars do not get out of the way. And I was amazed how many cars went through intersections. And we came up to one intersection, and after we'd gone through, Officer Matea said, I hope you realized I was not going to blow through that stop sign. I said, I was truly wondering who was going to stop first, you or the other car. But it was interesting to see what went on a medical. And once again, I have the highest respect for these police officers and everything that they do, and keeping our city safe and putting their lives on the line every day. Because you never know, in the twinkling of an eye, it changes. And I can also say too, being on those ride-alongs, I've gone in the police station at night, it is scary. It puts a haunted house to shame. It's so creepy going down those halls. It's dark, there's corners. And so since it's so secure, there's nobody hiding in there or being able to break in. So I'm really excited that these officers are getting a getting this new public safety building that is much needed for a long time. And it just adds a level of morale and safety for all of us. So thank you, Chief, and thank your officers. They are wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
That's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes, well, first I want to say thank you to Councilmember Stoker. Is that your last report that you're gonna give to us before you leave us? Or are you gonna give us another one next month?
One more.
One more? All right, very good. Well, Parks and Recreation is gearing up for all things holiday. We have moved the Christmas, the tree lighting and the Santa's workshop over to Barker Park, which is a little bit better suited to have the crowds. And they're going to do the Christmas tree lighting on December 4th, which happens to be my birthday. So I get that like right across the street from my house. They're going to light the Christmas trees at 5 p.m. So then Santa will be able to take visits, of course, after the ceremony, and Mondays from 5:30 to 7:30 and Saturdays from 11 to 1. Then we've got the North Pole activities that we partner with Lindy Bess, and they're doing that from December 20th to 23rd, and that's from 5:30 to 8:30. That will include holiday displays, Santa, reindeer, hot chocolate, and an electronic light show, and a winter wonderland forest. So sounds very fun. And that's it.
Any questions for Councilmember Ekstrom? Or Councilmember Barker?
I had some citizens reach out. Is there a way we could find out that they're moving stuff before the day of? Because they reached out to me and I had no clue what was even happening, that it was moving to Barker Park. And so it'd just be nice if we could be notified.
Like,
I didn't know it was getting moved.
I
And everyone, I had people asking me, and I felt kind of foolish since I live right across the street from there and I had no clue what was even happening up there, so.
yeah, I don't know if there was a mechanism for us to let us know, or if that's something that they just decided departmentally. And is it somebody that wants to come or somebody that's worried about?
No, they wanted to come, they just were wondering what was going on, and
Hopefully they'll have a lot more, probably in the next week, maybe some more advertising for it so that people will know what it is. Because people will look for it, and I'm afraid people are gonna show up. Maybe I can suggest to Tiffany that they put something over at the Bicentennial Park, just kind of giving people a heads up, hey, it's over at Barker Park. That's a good idea. Thanks, right?
Yeah, I think Councilmember Barker's point is on a major change of that nature, it's a little bit embarrassing when the council gets calls. And we have no idea that that was taking place. So I think, it's hard to kind of define a major thing. We don't want to get into the weeds, but when things are major, I think it would be good for department heads to send a text or an email or something out to the council so they're not caught blindsided. So. All right, Councilmember Swanson, the minute we've been waiting for the entire meeting. It's your report.
In general numbers, you've heard a lot about finance tonight. Before we look at this, my hat's off to Jamie and John and Mayor for the work that you've done with the public financing, the public works facility. To think that we can bond for, close to $7 million, that we have the cash on hand to put in, it's not insignificant. Several $1 million that we have on hand that we can put into this thing. And to be able to do the bond without raising taxes, that's a pretty amazing, almost unheard of effort, and Herculean effort. And I applaud the efforts and the many hours that you've all spent getting that done. And we're still in a great financial place as a city. We're very sound and very safe, and pretty amazing to think that we can have a bond. I just came earlier this evening, was at the Truth and Taxation hearing for the county and their proposed increase, and knowing that there's a library bond that's going to be coming, and guarantee you that there'll be a tax increase that goes with that as well. So it's wonderful. Thank you for the great work that you've done. We are, excuse me, we're 34% of the way through the year. In our fiscal year, our general fund expenditures is at 25.1% of budget. So again, our department's demonstrating that even after we have incredibly frugal budgeting, and we really hold their feet to the fire and, you know, just what do you need? We don't do a lot of superfluous stuff, but they still are able to come in under budget. It's pretty amazing. We have a great team here. You look here at our sales tax. Last year, our sales tax was at, for the month of September, we're a month or two behind in when we receive it. 344,000 last year, 351 this year. But if you look at our year-to-date collections, we're about 11% ahead of where we were last year. And last year was way ahead of the year before that. So again, economists don't quite understand where the spending's coming from, but we'll take it. It'll be interesting to see. You see that we were 3% up in July, almost 30% in August, back down to 2% above prior year in September. It'll be interesting to see what October comes in and see if we've got some kind of a trend happening there. But other than that, we're doing very well. The city's in great hands and we're in great financial shape. So thank you to the team that puts that together.
Thank you, Councilmember Swanson. We appreciate all you do in directing the financial efforts of the city. We appreciate that. Any questions for Councilmember Swanson? All right, we'll now entertain any further public comments. John, if you would please be attentive to those who are online, and then if we have any further comments this evening, if you'd step to the podium and state your name, and if you live in North Ogden City, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. I won't be rude, but I will remind you as we get close to the 3 minutes. So anybody have any comments this evening?
Okay, Butch Campbell. Yes, I live in North Ogden. I have waited 2 hours to make these comments, so I'll get started. It really doesn't amount to anything, but so that Monroe going through with the Coop subdivision, I'm in agreement, like having the Coops participate in the cost of that road that they don't front onto, and that road doesn't serve any purpose for them, would be cumbersome, right? And that road going up through there, there's not, the section that we talked about tonight, there's not a single home that will face onto that section of road, not a single home. They all have their different driveways, they all have their different frontages. It will not be on Monroe. And so having those homeowners participate in the cost of that road construction, that's going to have utilities go upstream and serve homeowners up the way, right? Like asking those homeowners to participate in that cost when they're not going to get any benefit from that road, it seems unfair to me. And you know, what it's going to do is it's going to increase traffic for those homeowners, right? It's going to increase noise. So why would those homeowners participate in the cost of that road? And there was a comment made about the stories that they violated something. And I've actually reviewed the documents that I've been able to find on that. And I don't see the stories in violation of anything. What they did do is they sold the city that strip of ground when there's landowners who won't sell to the city for that road. Eventually, you know, I guess opening the door for eminent domain or something. But they did participate in that. So yeah, and they would have been paid from the city fair market value for the square footage that the city took. So why does it make sense then for them to take that money that they were paid from the road just to put it back into improvements in the road. Just doesn't line up for me. So I don't think any of the homeowners along there should participate in the cost of that when there's no benefit to them. Now, I know I'm running out of time, but now if they want to subdivide and create a building lot, sure, they need to participate in the cost. But if they're not going to subdivide and create building lot, whatever, it just doesn't make sense. So, and I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. John, anyone online? Anyone further this evening?
My name is Reed Miller. Of course, I'm from North Ogden. And as an officer of the United States Army, I took an oath, and the oath was to support and defend the Constitution. And of course, all of our government officials do the same. And so it's important, as I see, to understand the Constitution and to really uphold that Constitution. Unfortunately, we see that many of our government officials in the feds and many times in the states are overreaching their powers that have been granted to them in the Constitution. And we've had some really serious debates these last, couple months about mandates and other things. Now, there's a city of Riverton where the mayor took up and wrote up a thing that he would never go with these federal mandates that are unconstitutional. Now, Article 6 of the Constitution has a way for states and cities to actually go against unconstitutional acts by the feds. And this mayor outlined these things. And I want to share these with you because I think they're important for us as a city to really be aware of it. Okay. And as a constitutionalist, I asked Mayor Berube and also the members of the North Ogden City Council to uphold and defend the Constitution by issuing a statement of opposition regarding the COVID-19 mandates issued by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. That's OSHA. See, the feds have given that over to the agency that is non-elected to make these mandates and things. The long-awaited rules for the Biden administration concerning COVID-19 vaccine mandates for employees with over 100 employees has been released by OSHA under an emergency temporary standard. This unconstitutional overreach by an unelected federal agency contains hundreds of pages of the new OSHA rules. This should be alarming to every person that values freedom, liberty, and opportunity for all. These sweeping mandates are a complete disregard on the part of federal government for both individuals and businesses to make decisions for ourselves. I ask that the mayor and city council of North Ogden will never implement or force these rules on city employees. I encourage private businesses, our congressional delegation, and Utah state government to do all they can to push back and rein in this overreach.
Reed, I'm going to have to call your time here.
Okay, I'm giving you this paper, each one of the council members. It's a statement of nullification. That's what we can do whenever an overreach is done. And so I want you to be aware of this.
And thank you, Reed, for your comments. you know, I can't speak for the council, but I don't think we're in the business of determining what's constitutional or not, but I can assure you that things that are determined to be unconstitutional, we will not implement in our city. So that's very good. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. Appreciate it. All right, anybody else? John?
Nope.
Anyone else here? All right, thank you for joining us and thank you for your comments this evening. Appreciate it. We'll now go on to comments from the council. Council, do you have anything that's been brought up by citizens? Councilmember Swanson.
Council, we received an email today from Nate Allen talking about yet another method of voting, approval voting, which is similar but different than ranked choice voting, and in some circumstances preferred over ranked choice. But given that we gave some time to the ranked choice voting folks, I spoke with Ricky Hatch today from the county, and he has spent some time with these folks, and what they have to say, I guess, is interesting. So if we could, in January, would you be amenable to having Nate come in and give us a half-hour presentation on approval voting?
I think we should be open, and as a council member, you have the right to place that on the agenda, so we'll take that as a request.
Thank you. John, will you let me know what date, and then I'll let Nate know.
Okay, we'll let you know.
What's that?
We will let you know.
Okay.
We'll have to discuss the date.
So we'll get back to you on that.
Okay, just let me know. The other thing is to echo what Councilwoman Stoker said earlier about the police. I got to spend an entire shift Friday night with the street crimes unit from Weber County. Talk about an interesting night.
Were you riding along or were you arrested?
I was writing along.
Let's just say I had a good night.
All right.
It is amazing what our law enforcement officers do. The things that they see that we pulled vehicles over. We were in an unmarked vehicle. We pulled vehicles over for things that were seemingly trivial, but there were indicators. And Chief, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I still couldn't see them by the end of the night. But these very experienced officers, there's something fishy about that car. And so a legitimate reason, a legitimate pullover is made. And the next thing you know, methamphetamine and heroin and weapons are coming off the person and out of the vehicle. It's just like, are you kidding me? We provided accommodations for several individuals Friday night. But hats off to law enforcement. What an environment that you all are in on a daily basis. And, you know, as Cheryl said earlier, Councilwoman Stoker said earlier, putting your lives on the line on a daily basis. We're grateful for the service that you provide us.
Thanks, Councilmember Swanson. I know that the chief in our staff meetings report some of the activities that are going on, and you know, proactive policing while staying within the law is very important, which our officers do. And it's amazing some of the things that are in cars that are pulled over for legitimate reasons, outstanding warrants. And I do admire our officers, and I think that criminals know they're taking a higher risk being in our city. They might give it a second thought, so I appreciate that. Any other comments from council?
Mayor? Oh, sorry, Brian.
Councilmember Barker.
Kind of piggyback on this police appreciation. There's a charity basketball game coming up between police and firefighters, December 4th. It's actually in Pleasant View, and we were high. I don't know if we have any North Ogden officers playing, but it is to support two families here in North Ogden. I don't know if we should mention their names, but we have two families that desperately need help. The last couple of years, I know they've raised over $10,000 to $15,000 each for each family. So if you got nothing better to do after the Santa Christmas tree lighting, come up to Weaver High and watch police and firefighters play basketball. I think it starts at 6. I need to get more information, but we'll be pushing out information on the firefighter side. I'm sure the city will push out stuff. I hope they would help us out. But they are for 2 great families here.
Good. Well, I'm excited to see Chief Quinney at point guard and Dave Espinosa at power forward. So it'll be good.
And for what it's worth, the police beat the firefighters the last 2 years. So.
Well, gives you some motivation for revenge then, doesn't it?
That's why I play softball.
All right, Council Member Severing, I believe you had a comment.
I did. I was just gonna say thanks to Scott and Planning Department for helping Julie and Corey Bags. Appreciate that. And then, of course, Chief, we're grateful to see you, police officer. And Dave, just wanted to quickly just say thanks for what occurred here with all of the road construction. I think from my perspective, it was handled so well. And if there were one silver lining to a lighter winter, it was being able to get started quicker, but it just seemed very efficient. So thank you. So everybody, thank you.
Any other comments? I think we will be taking the opportunity in an upcoming meeting to recognize some great things that happened in our community with our public safety group to show what's going on. Sometimes we don't get that out in the public's eye, and it's our intention to recognize some good things that happened recently. Any comments from staff that are here tonight? John?
Just one, it ties into planning, that's a ton of work that what Scott and Brandon and Kai and Rob, who's retired, have gone through to get these type of things together. And you can see even from the discussion tonight, how complicated the code is and how many times the goal of the staff and even of the council is justice, equity, fairness, and sometimes we're even tripping on our own code. And so it's a struggle, and thanks to them for all their work, because it hasn't been an easy task. So
good comments. I would just, before we seek adjournment motion, next week on Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock, the council will be holding a work session. And we'll be talking, we'll also involve our new council member. In that meeting, we would like to identify 4 or 5 things that we can focus on and develop plans to accomplish in the city over the next period of time. So we would invite the public to come and give their input. We've asked the department heads to get with John and make sure they identify anything they'd like discussed by the council at the work session. That'll be next week and in the chambers here at 6 o'clock. So
Are you still limiting to 15 people?
depends on if we have our calculator or not, but yeah, we're trying. Obviously the variant is very active in the community. And so yes, we would encourage those who would like to attend to register for attendance so that we can properly social distance for those who are interested in attending, at least providing that opportunity. We will still have opportunities for members of the community to participate electronically, but that is still our intention to do. All right, with that, we'd be looking for a motion to adjourn this meeting. Do we have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn. Second, non-debatable motion. We'll end this meeting, and staff and council have a good Thanksgiving, and members of the community enjoy this week.